the 4-4-2, there's something about the 4-4-2 that feels like football in its purest form. 2 banks of 4, 2 strikers up top, and none of that overcomplicated nonsense about inverted wingbacks tucking inside like they're playing chess. Back in the day, every team used this because it just worked. You had wingers running down the line, fullbacks overlapping, and strikers who actually stayed in the box instead of drifting out wide pretending to be midfielders. Think about Sir Alex Ferguson's United, especially that 1999 treble team. That was 4-4-2 football at its peak. York and Cole up front, Giggs on the wing, Beckham whipping crosses like he had a radar built into his right foot. It was direct, it was fast, and it was brutal. You didn't need 20 passes to break a line. You just needed to give it to Beckham and let him ping one onto a striker's head. And it's not just a relic of the past either. Diego Simeone basically dragged Atletico Madrid into 2 Champions League finals with a gritty, compact 4-4-2. People like to call it outdated, but honestly, the 4-4-2 is like that one old Nokia brick phone. It's not flashy, but it will never stop working. And speaking of flashy, the complete opposite of the 4-4-2 is probably the 4-3-3. If the 4-4-2 is old school rock and roll, then the 4-3-3 is modern EDM. It's all about pace, pressing, and players running everywhere until defenders can't breathe anymore. This is the formation that gave us Barcelona under Pep, which was basically football's version of a cheat code. First it was Messi, Eto'o, and Henry. Then later it was Messi, Pedro, and Villa. And then it was Messi, Neymar, and Suarez. I mean, it's ridiculous. The beauty of the 4-3-3 is the flexibility. You can have wingers hugging the touchline or cutting inside like Salah and Mane did under Klopp. And then you've got that midfield 3 that can be anything you want. Klopp's Liverpool made it terrifying because their front 3 worked like a machine. And behind them, Henderson, Wijnaldum, and Fabinho were basically doing the running of 10 men. It's also the formation that gave birth to the high press. And if you want even more control in midfield, that's when people start looking at the 4-2-3-1. Now this one is pure Mourinho territory. You want balance, structure, and the ability to absolutely strangle a game to death? The 4-2-3-1 has you covered. Those 2 holding midfielders sit there like bouncers at the door of a nightclub, deciding who's allowed anywhere near the back 4. Then you've got the number 10 floating around pulling strings, and a lone striker waiting to pounce. Inter Milan's treble in 2010 is probably the perfect example. Mourinho had Cambiaso and Motta locking things down, Sneijder in that number 10 role, and Milito scoring when it mattered most. It was both defensively solid and lethal on the counter. But it's not just Mourinho. Almost every manager in the 2000s and 10s used this because it gave them control. Real Madrid under Mourinho had Ozil feeding Ronaldo, Di Maria, and Benzema. And the best part about it is that number 10 role. Every kid wanted to be the number 10. You've got to wear flashy boots, avoid most of the running, and still take all the glory if you slip the striker in for a goal. But if you like your strikers to come in pairs and your wing-backs to run marathons every game, then the 3-5-2 is where it gets spicy. When Conte turned up in the Premier League and dusted off the 3-5-2, people laughed. But plot twist. Within months, Chelsea was running through the league, and suddenly every manager was pretending they'd always loved the formation. It's a system that relies heavily on wing-backs. And I mean heavily. Those poor guys are basically asked to be defenders, midfielders, and wingers all at once. At the same time, you get 3 centre-backs covering each other, so defensively it's solid. And in midfield, you've usually got 3 players giving you control, while up front, the strikers can play off each other. Juventus under Conte mastered it with Tevez and Llorente, and later Inter with Lukaku and Lautaro. It's also one of the most tactical chessboard formations. You can tweak it into a 3-4-3, and you can make it a 5-3-2 if you're under pressure. I personally like to call it the Swiss Army knife of football tactics. And speaking of 3-4-3, the 3-4-3 is what you get when you look at the 3-5-2 and say, yeah, that's nice, but let's cause chaos. Tuchel used it at Chelsea when they went on that Champions League run, and it was perfect. You've got 3 centre-backs keeping things tidy, wing-backs bombing up and down, and then a front 3 that press like madmen. It's a formation that gives you insane width and options. The wing-backs pin back the opposition full-backs, and the front 3 can rotate all over the place. But it's also risky. If your wing-backs get pinned back, suddenly you're just defending with 5, and the midfield 2 can get overrun. That's why it's usually used by teams with incredible fitness levels. Still, when it works, it looks beautiful. Guardiola has tried it at City, sometimes pushing João Cancelo into weird positions that only he seems to understand. So basically what I'm saying is, it's not for everyone, but when the right manager gets it right, it's like poetry in motion. And if you want something even more compact, that's where the 4-1-4-1 comes into play. The 4-1-4-1 is like that guy in the friend group who never says much but keeps everyone together. It doesn't look glamorous, but tactically it's clever. You've got that one holding midfielder sitting in front of the back four like a bodyguard, and then four across midfield who can press high or drop deep. It keeps the team compact, but it also gives freedom for those midfielders to push forward when they sense blood. Pep Guardiola loved this at Bayern Munich. Xabi Alonso basically had the easiest but most important job in the world. He'd just sit there, spray passes, and stop anything that moved through the middle. The beauty of it is in transition. If you win the ball high, the midfield four are already close enough to link up with the striker. But if you lose it, that holding midfielder drops in to make life miserable for the opponent. It's balanced, it's clever, and it's built for control-freak managers. But if you're talking about balance and control, then you can't ignore the 5-3-2. Now this one is the defensive cousin of the 3-5-2. You know when a team decides, we're not losing today even if it kills the spectacle? That's the 5-3-2. It's essentially a 3-5-2 that's been shoved back into its shell. The wing-backs tuck in, the midfield narrows, and suddenly you've got two walls of defenders that are impossible to break through. Remember Costa Rica at the 2014 World Cup? They shocked everyone with it because nobody could break them down. And they made the quarterfinals when everyone thought they'd finish bottom of their group. The downside is obvious though. You don't get much attacking flair unless your wing-backs are superheroes. But on the counter, it's lethal. Of course, if you don't like defending deep and prefer running everything through midfield, the next formation is the one that really flexes your creative muscles. The 4-3-1-2, diamond midfield. The diamond midfield looks so good when it works. You've got a holding midfielder at the base, two shuttlers on either side, and then a proper playmaker at the top pulling all the strings. And up front, two strikers playing off each other. Carlo Ancelotti's AC Milan absolutely thrived with this, with Pirlo sitting deep, Gattuso doing the dirty work, Seedorf covering ground, and then Kaká floating at the top of the diamond tearing teams apart. Add Shevchenko and Inzaghi up front and suddenly it's a nightmare to defend against. The only catch is width. You've basically got none, unless your fullbacks are running machines. But that's part of the fun. It forces you to play through the centre, which makes games look like tactical dogfights. When Real Madrid used it under Ancelotti, it was the same story. James Rodriguez in the Kaká role, Kroos and Modric working the sides, and Ronaldo and Benzema finishing chances. And if you think the diamond is brave, wait until you hear about the 3-6-1. This one is rare, but when it shows up, it's unforgettable. The 3-6-1 is the tactical equivalent of hoarding midfielders like their Pokemon cards. You've got three centre-backs, one lonely striker, and then six midfielders crammed in between. It sounds insane, but it actually works if you want to completely choke the life out of a game. The idea is simple. Control the midfield so much that the opponent never even gets to test your defence. The striker doesn't even need to be world-class. He just needs to run, press, and take his one chance when it comes. It's not flashy, and it's not something you'll see every week, but it's a formation that shows just how creative managers can get. But if you're talking about defensive organisation mixed with counter-attacking magic, then the 4-5-1 is the classic underdog weapon. The 4-5-1. This formation is built for teams that want to defend like their lives depend on it and then hit you with a sucker punch. 5 across midfield makes it so compact that breaking through feels like climbing a wall. The lone striker is usually running around up top like a madman, waiting for scraps, but when it clicks, it's deadly. The best example was Greece at Euro 2004. They weren't supposed to win a single game, but with their 4-5-1, they frustrated everyone. They defended in numbers. They worked their socks off. And before you knew it, they were lifting the trophy in Lisbon, while the rest of Europe sat there stunned. It's also a shape that can easily morph into a 4-3-3 if your wide midfielders push higher up. That's what makes it so useful for managers who want flexibility. You can start defensive, then suddenly flip the switch and go attacking. Every underdog manager has a soft spot for it, and honestly, it makes sense. If you don't have world-class talent, you make yourself hard to beat first. And the 4-5-1 is probably the best formation to do just that. Football formations are funny because they're never just tactics, they're personalities. Ferguson's 4-4-2 was basically all aggression. Pep's 4-3-3 is like a math equation nobody else can solve. And then you've got Greece winning a Euros by defending like their lives depended on it. It just proves there's no one right way to play this game. So now I want to hear it. If you had to manage one game for your life, which formation would you trust? Let me know your pick in the comments, and don't be boring with it either. Oh, and while you're there, you'd want to hit like and subscribe, because we've got plenty more of these videos coming, and you don't want to be the guy hearing about it secondhand.